Okay, roof tutorial. Apologies in advance, I'm probably going to make some mistakes and have to redo things. I'm sort of making this up as I go along. But this is one way to do it. There are other ways to build this roof, but this is the way that I did it. So you can see I've cleared up the file just to give us something clean to start with so you can see what's going on. I've dropped in a few reference images and I've built myself a little grid based on some of the other drawings that I gave you showing the set out for the rafters and the battens. The one thing I have added to this is this red line, which is basically the inside edge of my inner ring beam as a reference point, and that you can see is this 1115 measurement here and here. So I've got that in place, and I know that is 1115 from the inside edge of the ring beam. So all of these batten lines are to the inside edge of the batten. All of the rafters are the center lines of the rafters. That's the only thing you kind of have to remember. I've also added a reference point, which is basically the midpoint of this grid. So it's midway spaced between the two middle rafters, and it's on my line here, which will become our pivot line. So, and I've just made that as a group so that I can grab it and move it to where I need it to be. So let's start with the hip rafters. So let's just draw construction line. You can see I've just made a little layer structure here, roof structure, hip rafters, battens, gutter channel, and I've got a construction layer, and I've just put everything else in another layer to get it out of the way. So we're going to run a line from, let's see, now we want our hip rafter to have a nice little square pad that it sort of sits on here. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to make a little bit of construction geometry. We're going to have it so that it sits at this point here. So we'll draw two little pieces of line like that, and our hip rafter is going to run from the midpoint of each of those lines. So now I'm going to stretch that. Now I've got my gumball in object mode. If you don't, it's useful to drop it out from C-plane to object mode, because it means that when it's in C-plane, it aligns to the C-plane. So if I were to stretch it, it would distort. But if it's in object mode, it aligns to your object. So you can grab stretch handles, whoops, and just go, useful thing. So we don't need these little bits of line anymore. Get rid of them. So now we're going to build the rafter itself. Now the rafter is a 150 by 40. So let's use the box command. I'm going to use the edge midpoint option. Select the end of my line. Just get myself in the right spot so that I can see what's going on. The edge midpoint means it's a both sides type thing. So it's a 40 by 150, so one side is 20. Then we want to go down to our other end, and then we want to come up 150. So there's our hip rafter cut in exactly the right spot. Now I'm not going to bother biting out those lands just yet. I'm going to put that in the hip rafter layer so that it goes a nice color. Right, now the next thing I want to do, and you don't necessarily have to do it in this order, but I find this sort of helps a little bit, is I'm going to build one of the regular rafters. So again, Now, with the regular rafters, we also want to take a little bite out of it, but we want our bite to start at the back edge of the ring beams. So we're going to draw our line, doesn't matter where, so long as when you go up to the outer ring beam, we hit the right spot and we hit it perpendicular. There it is. So you've got to make sure your perpendicular O-snap is on. If you're on Windows, I think they're up the top. So perpendicular. Again, I'm going to take that and I'm just going to stretch it out. And then in exactly the same way as I did before, go box, edge midpoint, 20, and the regular rafters are 130 by 40, so we go up 130. Now I will take the bites out of this because I'm going to be duplicating it. So I'm going to Boolean difference, turn off the ISO curves. So you can see now it's got the little pieces cut out. It's too long, but we'll trim it later. So now I need to move it into the right spot. So here's where our handy grid comes into play. We're going to move that from the midpoint of that edge in a line that way over to our first position. Now we check it's in the right spot. It should be exactly cutting through that outer ring beam, which it is. So now we want to make copies of that at all our spacings. So I'm going to go copy. Now you don't have to reference off the object. You can reference off anything. So I'm going to copy from here and I'm just going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 rafters. And then I'm going to check my last rafter is also cutting through the ring beam, which it is, so I know it's all in the right spot. So there's our rafters. Next thing we're going to do is, get rid of that, don't need that anymore. We want to make a reference plane. So this will give us something to rotate the whole plane of the roof in and out of the right spot. So what we're going to do is we're going to go plane, 3 point. We're going to use the inside edge of our inner ring beam so as our first reference line. So we're going to go from the end of that to the other end of it. And then we're going to go up and we're going to reference off the inside edge of our outer ring beam. Now what I didn't do before was grab all of those rafters and chuck them in the rafter layer. No. Rafters, change object layer. Okay, just so that we can tell them apart. I also, just for the sake of being able to see what's going on, I want to make that plane transparent. And the easiest way to do this is with a kind of a bit of a, it's not a cheat, but it's normally with Rhino's display modes, when you tip everything into say ghosted mode, it makes everything ghosted. But what we actually want to do is just make that plane ghosted. So you can actually use a set object display mode command. Set object display mode. I've selected that object, and instead of use view, I want to use ghosted. I've made another preset called glass, which is like ghosted but even more. And I can do that. And now my plane is transparent. Just makes it a little easier to see what's going on. Now I'm going to use the stretch handles. I'm going to make it big. And then I'm going to rotate it and copy it. One side, the other side. And then I'm going to select all of those, trim, and we're going to trim off these edges, and then we don't need that one, and we don't need that one, and there is our reference plane. Right. So now what we're going to do is, I like to, rather than just working in place, I like to kind of grab everything to our plane, our hip rafter, that's everything, and just copy it up. And this way, each time I make a major change, I make a copy and move it up. And that way, if I screw something up, I can just go back to the previous step. I haven't made a mess. And it's also really clear what's going on. So, things we can do here. All right. Now what we need to do is, because our grid is flat and all of the dimensions I've given you is effectively with the roof flattened out, we need to rotate our pieces using the reference plane into the horizontal plane. So grab it all, make another copy of it, and I'm going to rotate 3D, R3. I'm going to use this back edge as my reference, select the front edge, and then rotate it up to horizontal. So now it's in the same plane as my grid. So I can actually grab my grid, copy from our handy center point here, which is the center point. The center point is on this red line, which was our inner edge of our ring beam, which just also happens to be the edge of this plane. So we grab that and we come up here, we find center of that plane, midpoint, ding. Hold on, that's not right. What's going on? Let's try that again. Copy from there. That's better. Okay. And just to check, you can see that it lines up nicely with all our rafters. So we're going to do the battens, and the battens sit on top of the rafters, so we need to move our reference grid up. So we're going to move vertical, pick some point on your grid, and then pick some point on the top of your rafters. So now we have our grid sitting on top of the rafters. So now we can make our battens. So just for the hell of it, I'm going to make another copy, and I'm making way too many copies, but it doesn't matter. So now our battens, what are they? They're 70 by 40. So box, edge midpoint, from there. Now half of 70 is 35, other end, and they are 40 thick. We're going to put that in the battens layer, and then we're going to copy that. Now remember our batten lines were the front edges of the batten, not the mid lines. So we're going to move it so that it's on the front edge of that line. Looks like my hip rafter's not long enough. That's okay, I can stretch it. Let's just grab the midpoint of the hip rafter and let's stretch that out a bit. That's better. Okay, so now we can copy that batten using our grid and go 1, 2, 3, 4. So there are our battens. And once again, for the hell of it, I'm just going to make a copy of that and just keep on going. So the next thing we want to do is we need to put in those two pieces that form both the edge of the roof panel and the kind of channel that the gutter sits in. So those were, if we look at our drawing, these bits here. This one, which is 140 by 19, and this one, which is 90 by 40. So let's go the 140 by 19 first. So we're going to use the edge of our hip rafter as the reference. So we're going to go box, from there to the other end, and it was, what was it? It was 140, whoops, by 19. I'm going to put that in the gutter channel layer, change object layer. Okay, and I've made that orange. Now, I'm just using the box command a lot. There are other ways, you know, you could draw rectangles and extrude them. I just find box super easy. If you just type box, it's the 3-point box that I'm using a lot. But I've just got an alias defined so that when I type BX, it's the same as if I do box 3-point. And if any of you are interested in how to set up your aliases so that you can do this stuff really quickly, I can show you how to do that. So we've got our first piece there. Then the second piece is a 90 by 40. So again, box. And we'll use the bottom edge of that as our reference. Down to there. And it's 90 that way. Get it in the right plane, and 40 thick. All right, it's gone the wrong way, so we just have to move it up, move up. And you probably remember that it has this little divot out of it. So that is a 20mm overlap. So we're going to move this piece, move 20mm in, 20. And then we're going to Boolean difference using this, and now it's got it. Now it's got the bite out of it that we need. So I'm going to put that. I'm going to put that in my gutter channel layer. Now you'll notice that this is sort of almost perfectly in the right spot here. So now if you look at the photos, you'll see that the battens actually cut this outside piece and then get cut off themselves by this inside piece. So what we're going to do is we're going to, let's see, what's going to be the easiest way to do this? All right, let's just select our battens, Boolean difference with this piece, and then we can get rid of all these end bits we don't need anymore. Now we need to do the same on the other end. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a copy. Oh, wait a minute, I did that the wrong way. Sorry, my mistake. It's this that gets cut by the battens. So let's Boolean difference that using all our battens. That's more like it. So that's now right. We need to select all of that stuff. Actually, I can just do it here. Select everything on the gutter channel layer. And we need to make a copy of that, a mirror copy to the other side. So mirror, copy, that's our midpoint, like that. Now we don't copy the hip rafter, we just copy those two pieces. Now we need to trim our battens. So once again, I'm going to take all of this and make another copy of it in case I screw it up. Now we want our battens cut off flush with this edge here. So I'm going to use well, I'll show you two different ways to do it. You can use a vertical plane, PLV, use that edge as your reference. Just move it upwards so that it's cutting, and then select all your battens. Boolean split using the plane, delete the plane, and then we can trim off all of these. So that's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it, which we'll use on this other end, is sort of, it's a little bit quicker because it means you don't have to chop off all these end bits. So what we're actually going to do is, instead of making a plane, we're going to make a box. So we're going to use that edge, we're going to pull it right out here, I'm going to move it up slightly, and then we're going to select all of the battens. No, we don't want the grid, we just want the battens. And we're going to go Boolean difference with our block, and we're going to delete the block, and that just saves you having to reselect all the pieces of leftover batten. It's actually really handy if everything's grouped, because if you do a Boolean split on a bunch of grouped items, all of the pieces that you've split off end up in the same group, and you end up having to muck around and ungroup and delete the bits and then regroup again, and it's just a pain. So that's sort of a smaller way. I'm just going to turn off the ISO curves, and I'm actually going to group them for now. So we're getting pretty close. Everything's more or less where it should be, and really all we've got to do now is do a little bit of extra pruning on our rafters, adjust a few other things, and then we're almost ready to drop it in place. So let's trim our hairy bits of rafter. So we want to keep everything that's on the outside here. So we're going to use, we want it to come up to our hip rafter. So if I look underneath, we basically want it to be cut by the hip rafter so that it butts up against the hip rafter, but because it's got this little bit at the bottom, that's kind of irritatingly messy. So what we're actually going to do is, I could use the box or I could do a plane. Let's use the box. So box, use our hip rafter as the reference. Go there, and I'm going to go out here, and I'm going to make it fat. Actually, the plane probably would have been easier here. Yep, that works. Then I'm going to select all of those rafters. 1, 2, 3, 4. Boolean difference. Chop. Delete. And now my rafters are chopped off nice and neat. So that's all good. And then we'll do the same on the other side, but this time I'll use the alternative way of doing it, which is the plane, vertical. We want to use, oh no, we do need to copy the hip rafter, so because we need to borrow that plane. So mirror copy from our middle, and again we'll go plane, vertical, using our hip rafter. Let's make it nice and big. Let's move it. Oh, hang on. No, we don't want it vertical. PL3. So we want a 3-point plane. So we want there, there, and then we use our hip rafter top. Yep. Select our plane. Make it bigger. And that should be enough. Select those. Boolean split. Select our plane. Don't need the plane anymore. We don't need any of these bits. Another way to do the same thing. Okay. Well, it looks like we've got a little bit of hairiness on that. Oh no, that's right. That's right. Cool. Now, actually, what I just noticed there was these bits will actually have a piece chopped out of the end of them by this board. So let's do that now. So let's select our rafters, Boolean difference, and then we'll select that board and that board, and you'll see it's just chopped that little piece out there, so that when they sit together, if I hide those bits, you can see it sits just over that board. Now, like I said, we only need one hip rafter in the module because we're going to rotate it 4 times. So that, one more bit of pruning to do is we need to clean up the front edges of these bits. So we don't need that piece, and we don't need that piece, and these bits need to be cut off in the same plane as our roof. So PLV, we can use that reference line, just move that down, and then Boolean split, plane, and get rid of that, get rid of that, get rid of that. Okay, don't want ISO curves on. Okay, so that is pretty much the roof. There'll be a little bit of trimming off to do, but let's do that once it's in place. Actually, no. Let's do the ends of the rafters while we're here, because it's easier to do while it's flat than when it's curved. The outside edges of the rafters are trimmed off in the plane, and it's kind of a bit hard to get up there and measure how far the rafters stick out past the last batten, but I reckon it looks to me about the same distance again as the thickness of the batten, which is 70 millimeters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a plane vertical that's in line with that last batten, and we want to move it out 70 millimeters, and we want to trim off all of those end bits. Boolean split, plane, get rid of the plane, and then we can get rid of all of these end bits. So that's all of those. Let's see. I could probably trim these bits off. Now, these stick out a little bit. How far do they stick out? Let me just check on my other model. I think I told you this in class today, but let's, oops, not you. Again, this is not something I could measure. I had to kind of eyeball it. Looks like about 250. So they stick out 250. So let's draw a line from here that's 250 long in the direction of that. And then we want a plane vertical from that point that is perpendicular. Whoops, didn't make that thick enough. And we're going to use that to trim off these bits. Select Boolean split plane. Oops, I only did one of them. Boolean split plane there. Now I'm going to copy mirror, copy that piece of plane so I don't have to draw it again. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Select both of those. Boolean split plane. Get rid of those. Get rid of that. Okay. That's basically the roof done. Don't need that. So now what we need to do is put it in the right place. You could also at this point do your cladding, your roof cladding, so lay out your roof sheets here and then trim them to the right shape. I'm not going to do that now because it's getting late. So now what we want to do is we want to bring this back into the plane of our roof. So I'm just going to steal this reference plane, copy vertical from somewhere on the edge up to, where's the reference plane? There. So this will show me how much I have to rotate everything back down by. Now, I'm just going to make another copy of this just for fun. I don't need a grid anymore. I'm going to select everything, deselect that, and then I'm going to rotate 3D. And I'm going to use the edge of my reference plane. I'm going to reference the flat reference plane. And I'm going to go down to the angled plane. And look at that. There's the roof. How cool is that? So now what we can do is we can actually go down here. I'm going to, let's see, I think I'll use the hip rafter as the reference. So I'm going to delete all of them because we don't need them anymore. I'm going to delete that, leave the rafter there, and then I'm going to go up to the top of my pile, select that, copy from that edge down to the same point on that hip rafter. Now I've got two of them there, I only need one, and look at that, it's the roof. Amazing. Let's ditch our reference plane for now. Oops, deleted the wrong hip rafter. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Let's just stretch that one out. Here's what I was saying earlier. Let's move it so that it's now lined up with that. Don't need that corner line anymore. And we want to stretch it so that, remember we were going to have the gutter in here. So we've got a line that's showing us where the gutter's going to come. I'm going to rotate copy that using my center line down here around. I didn't make it long enough, doesn't matter. Let's just stretch it out. So that's going to be what my gutter, the edge of my gutter, the outside edge of my gutter. So I don't want the hip rafter to run into it, but I want it to basically come up and just be short of that. So let's just stretch that. So scale 1D from there, and now I'm just going to eyeball this. I'm not going to fuss too much about it, but I'm just going to bring it down. I'm just going to make it, I'll put it about there. Can tweak this a bit later once the gutter's in place. A couple of other bits to tidy up before we start duplicating everything. We've got the tapers on these beams. That doesn't look right. What's going on? Oh dear, have I fucked it up completely? Yes, yes I have. Ah, I know what it was. When I brought it down, hang on, I'm just going to undo a bunch of stuff. I told you I'd make a mistake. When I copied it down using the rafter, that was the mistake, because my rafters, I made the other one longer. So let's not use the rafter as a reference point. Sorry about that, folks. Let's use the construction plane. So let's copy vertical from that top edge of that plane, and let's find that same edge here, which is our outer ring beam, and that's more like it. Now we don't need that, don't need that, don't need that. That's better. And now our little cutouts sit in the right spot. That's hanging out the right amount. That's more like it. So now let's just move that in to there and scale it. Thought I was going to actually manage to draw this whole roof without making a major mistake, but there you go. Look, let's just eyeball it to about there. So at this point, we could just select our roof, and I'm going to use array polar from the middle, and I want 4 items. Ooh, whoops, there you go. We just want that. We don't want select objects, but we don't want any of this great pile. Just want to do that. So array polar from the center, 4, and there's our roof. And how nice is that? But we don't want to do that yet, because we still have a bit of cleaning up work to do. We've still got to put our tapers on the ends of our rafters. We need to trim off these bits of rafter. We need to put the tapers on and the cutouts on the hip rafters. So just quickly, let's do a little bit of that. So a couple of ways you could do the tapers on these. I think off the top of my head it's 70 that it tapers. So we could use move edge. actually, before we do that, we need to put in a reference point. So 70, so that we've got something to move it to, and then we can use move edge, select our edge, and pain in the bum, you have to go along and select all of the edges, edge, 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 and go back to our first one and enter. From there to where our reference line is, chomp, and that's done all of the tapers on the outside, so they're all done now. Let's look at the inside. First thing we've got with the tapers on the inside is that these ones are cut off vertically. The ones on the outside are cut off in the plane of the roof, but these ones cut off vertically. So let's plane vertical. So at this point you've probably got all you need to know. You probably don't need to keep watching, but if you want to, let's do it properly. Let's Boolean split those with that. Chop, chop. What's going on under here? We need now, I think those were 70 as well. So let's draw a little reference line again. That's 70. And move edge, U, and U up to there. So that's our inside tapers. Now those ones, oh, they were probably, what did they come to? No, they just hit the hip rafter, I think. I think they're just like that. So those are the only ones we need to taper. No, because the hip rafter's got a taper in it as well. Yep, all right. So let's, I'm just gonna hide all of that because it's messing things up. All right, so we need to put our little divots in our hip rafter. So, whoops. What we want to do is we want to give us something to refer to. Let's do an intersect two sets. Can't remember if I've shown you this one before. It's like if you want to intersect a bunch of objects, but you don't want every single intersection. You just want everything in the, like say we want our ring beam intersect two sets with our hip rafter, because if I'd just done a regular intersect, I would have got a bunch of extra lines where the two ring beams intersect. Sorry, I didn't explain that very well, but you can sort of see there what we need to cut out. So we need to, let's make a box. If I just used, say, Boolean difference to chop this out, the problem we've got, oops, Boolean difference, sorry, that one, Boolean difference, that one, we end up with this sort of hairy bit because it's not a straight line across there. So I just move that up, you can sort of see, and that's a pain to cut. You wouldn't cut that as a joint. What you would do, actually forget that intersect stuff, we don't need that. let's just isolate. Let's do the same. Let's Boolean difference that with the inner ring beam as well. And then let's isolate that. ISO. And have a bit of a look. So we've got this little point here which we don't want. For you guys, look, you could leave it there, but I'm obsessive compulsive, so let's use a box. 1, 2, 3, 4. Boolean difference to clean it up a bit. And we'll do the same on the other one. Box, edge, edge, edge. Boolean difference. And that's cleaned up our edges. This is much more, this is what the carpenters would actually make. So we don't need our ISO curves. Unisolate. But now cutting those pieces out gives us our little edge that we can then move edge from. If I hadn't cut that first, when I moved that edge, it would move this entire line up. So you need to do these cutouts first for this trick to work. Now, that I think is 90. So let's tape us to 90. So line there, 90. And then move edge U from there to there. Don't need that. And what is it on the inside? I'm guessing it's probably going to be 70. Let me just check. What is it on the inside? Oh, maybe it's 90 as well. Distance. No, it's 90 as well on the inside. So again, and this is where that trimming, the cleaning up of that helps, because if we tried to move this edge without doing that little bit of cleanup, it would make a mess of this. When I originally modeled the roof, I think I did these trims with a plane and then a Boolean split, but doing it the second time around, I'm finding it much easier to just move edge. So 90 and move edge U from there up to there. And that's our hip rafter done. So that is pretty much the entire roof now fully done. So now we'll select all that stuff. I'm going to group it just because. And now we can do our array polar from the center for, and that should be everything. You can see we've got our nice little profile on the end here. That looks pretty good. I'd say that's a roof. Yep, I think we'll call it at that point. Your next bit is to do the cladding, and you can do the same trick. You can lay your cladding out flat. Let's bring all that stuff back. So you can lay your cladding out flat, or you can lay it out in the right plane. So I've just got my sheets. You can see each sheet overlaps the next sheet slightly. So there's the two sheets overlap, and you just sort of fit them into place. I think there are, let's see, how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 of the color bond pieces, and there are, looks like 7 of the polycarbonate pieces, and they overlap by exactly 70 mil, which is the thickness of the batten that they end up sitting on top of. So you can make yourself some little planes to trim that off. The trick is that is that in the right spot? Let's see. Let's just grab it and pull it down and see if it fits. It should do. The trick is that it actually overhangs our little channel by a small amount here. And that's so that when our steel gutter profile sits underneath, there's no way water coming off that can get up and underneath our gutter. And from memory, I think that was about 100 mil across. I would just eyeball that. Just make it the same on both sides. But there it is, the roof. Hopefully that helps you, and you might have even picked up a Rhino thing or two. Any questions, let me know, and I'll see you next week. See you later.